February 7 is not just another date on the calendar. It is not random, and it is not passing quietly. There are moments in time when heaven speaks with unusual clarity, and this is one of them. What you are hearing right now carries a different weight, a sharper edge of urgency, because this is not an invitation meant to linger indefinitely. This is a final notice, not born from anger, but from mercy. Not spoken to frighten, but to protect. Jesus is speaking because the window is still open, but it is closing. And when this door shuts, it will not creak, it will not warn, and it will not reopen with another sign. Many who hear this message may feel a sudden stillness inside, a pause in their thoughts, or a quiet tightening in the chest. That is not fear. That is recognition. It is the soul responding before the mind catches up. There are warnings that come wrapped in noise and spectacle, but the most serious ones often arrive calmly, firmly, and without drama. This message does not chase attention. It finds those who are meant to hear it. And if you are here now, listening to this, it is because this moment has already been marked. Jesus does not issue final notices casually. Throughout Scripture and spiritual history, a final notice always appears just before a shift, before a separation, before a change in access, before a movement of protection from one group and exposure for another. The final notice is not the end of love. It is the last expression of it before responsibility transfers to the listener. This is why this message matters so deeply. It is not only about what is coming. It is about what can still be avoided, what can still be covered, and what can still be aligned, if action follows hearing. February 7 stands as a threshold. On one side is guidance, clarity, and protection. On the other side is confusion that feels sudden, doors that close without explanation, and opportunities that vanish without warning. Many people misunderstand divine timing because they assume delay means permission. But delay is often mercy giving room to respond. This message is that room. It is the narrowing of time into a moment where decision matters more than intention. This is why ignoring this message carries weight. Not because Jesus withdraws love, but because doors in the spiritual realm operate on obedience and timing, not emotion. When guidance is given and ignored, protection does not vanish instantly, but it does not remain indefinitely either. There comes a point when silence replaces instruction, and silence is not peace. Silence is consequence. That is what makes this message urgent. Not panic-driven urgency, but sober urgency. The kind that calls you to wake up, not run away. There are people listening who have already felt a nudge in recent days, a sense that something needs to change. A quiet warning not to delay a decision, not to keep excusing what has already been exposed, not to keep waiting for a clear sign. This message confirms what has already been whispering in your spirit. The clarity you've been asking for is not coming later. It is coming now. This is it. Jesus is offering protection through instruction, guidance through warning. This message itself is a covering. To hear it is to be invited under that covering, but invitation still requires response. Too many miss protection because they admire the warning instead of obeying it. They listen, they agree, they feel moved, but they do not shift. And when the door closes, it feels sudden only because the warning was gentle. Understand this clearly. The door does not close because you are unloved. It closes because seasons end, and seasons that linger too long begin to rot. February 7 marks a moment when heaven says, now, not tomorrow, not after one more confirmation. Now, what hath been tolerated must be addressed. What hath been postponed must be decided. What hath been half obeyed must become whole. This message is rare because it carries both warning and safety in the same breath. Ignore it, and the door closes without another sign. Receive it, and protection activates quietly, powerfully, and decisively. You may not see fireworks. You may not feel dramatic change immediately. But what you do not see is what you are being shielded from, redirected away from, and preserved beyond. If you feel the seriousness of this moment, it is because your spirit understands the stakes. This is not meant to overwhelm you. It is meant to steady you. Jesus speaks final notice is not to condemn, but to rescue before rescue is no longer possible in the same way. What comes next depends on what you do with what you hear now. This part of the message is about awareness, about recognizing that this is not just another video, not just another word, not just another warning among many. This is a line being drawn quietly, lovingly, firmly. February 7 is the marker, and what you choose to do with this message will determine whether that line becomes a doorway or a wall. When Jesus gives what is called a final notice, it is important to understand what that truly means. In the human world, a final notice often sounds harsh, legal, or cold. But in the spiritual realm, a final notice is one of the deepest expressions of mercy. It is no threat. It is a boundary wrapped in love. It is Jesus saying, "I have shown you enough. I have waited long enough. Now you must choose." This is not about punishment. It is about positioning. A final notice appears when guidance has already been given repeatedly, through inner conviction, through circumstances, through words you could not ignore, and through doors that refused to open no matter how hard you pushed. Many people mistake these moments as bad luck or delay, when in truth, they were warnings in disguise. Jesus always warns before a shift, never after. He doth not surprise his people with loss. He prepares them with truth. This message is part of that preparation. The reason this message feels weighty is because it carries clarity. Clarity removes excuses. Once clarity arrives, neutrality disappears. You are no longer unaware, you are informed. And once informed, responsibility shifts. That is why this moment matters. February 7 is not about fear of what will happen. It is about awareness of what is already unfolding beneath the surface. You may be wondering, how do I know this final notice is for me? The answer is not found in outward signs alone, but in inward response. If something in you feels exposed, not condemned, but seen, this message is touching the right place. If you have been delaying a decision you already know you must make, this message is not new information. It is confirmation. If you have been waiting for a louder sign, a clearer voice, or a more dramatic moment, understand this. Final notices are rarely loud. They are firm. Jesus speaks to those who are willing to listen, not to those who demand proof. And often, the clearest sign is timing. You did not stumble upon this message accidentally. You are here because the warning reached you while there is still time to respond. That alone tells you something significant about your position. This final notice is also merciful because it reveals consequences before they arrive. Ignoring it does not cause chaos immediately. That is why many underestimate moments like this. The door does not slam in anger. It closes quietly. And once closed, what changes is access. Guidance feels harder to hear. Peace feels harder to hold. Opportunities feel fewer, not because God has left, but because the season that supported those things has ended. Jesus is saying, do not wait for loss to teach you what obedience could have protected. That is the heart of this message. Protection is not only about what you survive, but about what you never have to face because you listened in time. Guidance is not only about direction, but about avoidance, being led away from what would have cost you deeply. Some listening may feel resistance rising even now, a desire to minimize this message, to delay response, to say, later. That resistance is not logic, it is discomfort. Truth often presses before it frees, but discomfort is temporary. Regret lasts longer. This final notice is not meant to trap you. It is meant to release you from a path that looks familiar but leads to quiet loss. This is also why Jesus speaks clearly now. Ambiguity would be unkind. Vagueness would be unsafe. This message names the moment so you can act within it. February 7 is a marker because God works within time as well as beyond it. He honors moments. He sets boundaries. He opens and closes seasons not randomly, but purposefully. Before going further, pause and recognize the seriousness of what you are hearing. This is not content meant to entertain you. It is a message meant to position you. And if this resonates, if something in you knows this is real, then do not let this moment pass silently. If this message is speaking to you, take a moment now to acknowledge it. Like this message so it remains visible to others who may need this warning but have not yet heard it. Share it with someone you feel has been delaying a decision or standing at a crossroads. Leave a comment, not for algorithms but as a marker of response, a quiet yes that says you heard and you are paying attention. And if you have not yet subscribed, do so now, not out of habit, but as an act of staying aligned with messages meant to guard and guide you in critical moments like this. This call to action is not about numbers. It is about witness. When you engage, you are not only responding for yourself, you are helping this warning reach others before their window narrows. Sometimes obedience looks as simple as helping light reach another doorway before it closes. As this message continues, the focus will shift from understanding to application, from awareness to response. What Jesus is offering is not condemnation, but direction. I fear by foresight. You are not being rushed. You are being awakened. The next part will reveal how protection is activated through obedience and what is quietly being shielded from your life right now without you even realizing it. That revelation changes how this entire message should be received. Protection in the spiritual realm does not arrive randomly. It is not automatic, and it is not passive. Protection is activated. And one of the most misunderstood truths is this: protection is released through obedience, not intention. Many people intend to change, intend to listen, intend to respond soon. But intention without movement leaves protection dormant. This is why Jesus connects warning with instruction. The warning awakens you, but obedience covers you. There are things happening around you right now that you do not see. Paths being redirected. Conversations that never happened. Delays that were actually shields. Missed opportunities that were quiet rescues. This is not coincidence. This is protection at work. And it is tied directly to moments where you listened instead of resisted, paused instead of rushed, or stopped instead of pushing forward blindly. Obedience does not always feel powerful in the moment, but its effects are profound. When Jesus says this message carries your protection and guidance, he is revealing something serious. This message itself is a dividing line. Those who receive it and respond step under a covering. Those who hear it and dismiss it step outside of one. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually. Protection does not vanish all at once. It thins. And thinning protection is dangerous because it feels normal until something hits. Delayed obedience is especially risky because it creates the illusion of safety. Nothing bad happens right away. so the mind assumes the warning was exaggerated. But the spiritual realm does not operate on instant feedback. Consequences often wait, and when they arrive, they feel sudden only because the warning was ignored quietly. Jesus is not asking for perfection. He is asking for alignment. Alignment says, I hear you, and I adjust. That adjustment may be internal at first, a decision to stop justifying something, to stop postponing something, to stop entertaining something that has already been exposed. These internal shifts are powerful. They signal responsiveness, and responsiveness invites covering. There are listeners right now who have been feeling strangely protected lately without knowing why. You avoided something you almost stepped into. You felt stopped at the last moment. You changed your mind unexpectedly. That was not hesitation. That was guidance. This message explains it, and it also warns you not to override that guidance moving forward. When Jesus guides, he does so to keep you ahead of harm, not just to teach you lessons after pain. Obedience also sharpens discernment. The more you respond when prompted, the clearer guidance becomes. The more you ignore, the quieter it gets. This is why ignoring this message carries risk. It is not that Jesus stops speaking out of punishment. It is that ears that repeatedly ignore begin to dull. And dull discernment leads people into doors that look open but lead nowhere safe. Protection is not dramatic. It is subtle. It is found in restraint, in timing, in knowing when to wait and when to move. This message is giving you that timing. February 7 is not about pressure. It is about precision. It is a moment where obedience matters more than explanation. You may not fully understand why you are being asked to respond now, but understanding is not required for obedience. Trust is. Some will ask, what exactly must I do? And the answer is not a single action for everyone. For some, it is to walk away from something already weighing on the conscience. For others, it is to finally step into something long delayed. For some, it is to stop resisting a truth they have been trying to soften. The instruction is personal, but the principle is the same. Respond. This is how protection stays active. This is how guidance remains clear. When Jesus warns, he also positions. And when you move with that positioning, you remain under covering even when the environment shifts around you. Do not underestimate how serious this moment is simply because it feels calm. Calm doesn't mean unimportant. Some of the most decisive moments arrive quietly. This is one of them. What you do next will echo forward longer than you realize. Hold on. What comes next changes how you see everything that follows. Type I am chosen in the comments if this resonates with you. Blessing code 314 is now activated. This message did not reach you by accident, and neither did this moment. I feel led to speak directly to those who know this word touched their spirit. When you support this mission, you are not supporting a channel. You are helping this warning reach souls who are standing at their own unseen doors. Jesus says the seed you release becomes light for someone else's darkness, oil for someone else's lamp, and covering for someone else's household. I hear the Lord saying, as you sow into my voice going forth, I will not let your obedience return empty. This is not a donation. This is a prophetic response to what you just heard. If your spirit is stirred, act now through super thanks, membership, or PayPal. The links and QR code are placed in the description for this moment. I declare that every hand that gives in obedience will experience clarity, protection, and divine alignment. Move now, because obedience delayed is opportunity misplaced. There is a pattern woven throughout Scripture and spiritual history that many overlook until it is too late. Doors open and doors close. These doors are not always physical. Most of the time, they are seasons, permissions, assignments, and access points. When Jesus speaks about a door, he is often referring to a window of opportunity where grace is available in a specific form. And once that window closes, grace does not disappear, but it changes its expression. What was once guidance becomes consequence. What was once invitation becomes memory. The door mentioned in this message is not symbolic language meant to sound poetic. It is a real shift in access. Right now, there is still room to respond, to adjust, to realign. But that room is not unlimited. A door remains open only as long as it serves its purpose. When its purpose is fulfilled, it closes, not out of cruelty, but out of order. God is a God of order, not endless postponement. Many people assume that because God is patient, doors never truly close. This assumption has led countless individuals into unnecessary loss. Patience does not cancel deadlines. Mercy does not erase seasons. Even Jesus himself said there were moments when people would knock, believing the door was still open, only to discover it had already shut. The tragedy was not the closed door, it was the ignored warning before it closed. The most dangerous part about a closing door is that it rarely announces itself. It does not send reminders. It does not explain itself afterward. It simply shifts. And once it does, things that once flowed easily begin to resist. Peace becomes harder to maintain. Direction becomes blurred. What once felt protected begins to feel exposed. People often interpret this as spiritual attack, when in reality it is a seasonal shift they were warned about but did not respond to. February 7 is being marked because the door connected to this message is not staying open indefinitely. It is not meant to. Doors are transitional by design. They move you from one place to another. But staying in the doorway too long leaves you stuck, neither fully protected nor fully exposed, but vulnerable. This is why hesitation is so costly. Not because it angers God, but because it leaves you unpositioned. Jesus always speaks before a door closes. That is his nature. Silence comes after closure, not before. Right now, there is still a voice. There is still instruction. There is still clarity that tells you the door is not yet shut, but it is in motion. And doors in motion do not wait for comfort. They respond to timing. One of the greatest misunderstandings is thinking that good intentions keep doors open. They do not. Only response does. A door does not remain open because you agree with the warning. It remains open because you act on it. Agreement without action is still delay. And delay, when time-sensitive, becomes disobedience without intending to. Some listening may feel uneasy hearing this, not because it is wrong, but because it confirms something they have been avoiding. That uneasiness is not meant to shame you. It is meant to wake you. Doors close suddenly only to those who assume they would always have more time. To those who listen, the closing is not sudden. It is expected. There is also comfort in this truth. Closed doors are not always punishment. Often, they are protection after a point where protection could no longer function the same way. God closes doors to prevent greater harm. But he warns first so you can move willingly, not be forced by loss. This is the mercy inside the warning. If you have ever experienced a moment where everything seemed to change quickly, relationships, opportunities, clarity, understand that it was likely not sudden. It was delayed consequence. The door had been closing for some time, quietly, patiently, waiting for response. This message is interrupting that pattern for you now. Jesus is not asking you to fear the door closing. He is asking you to move while it is still open. Movement is safety. Alignment is safety. Obedience places you on the right side of the door when it finally shuts. This part of the message is meant to recalibrate how you see time. Not all time is equal. Some moments carry more weight than others. February 7 is one of those moments. Not because the date itself has power, but because of what is being decided within it. Do not confuse familiarity with permission. Just because something has remained unchanged for a while does not mean it will remain open indefinitely. Doors close when their assignment is complete. And right now, the assignment is warning. What comes next will address what happens when people ignore these moments, and why the consequences are often silent at first, then overwhelming later. Understanding this will help you recognize why responding now is not optional, but essential. When people ignore divine instruction, the consequences are rarely immediate. This is what makes them so dangerous. Silence does not mean approval, and calm does not mean safety. Often, the most serious outcomes begin quietly, almost invisibly, long before anything feels wrong. This is why Jesus warned so clearly before shifts take place. He knows that once the effects begin to surface, the opportunity to avoid them has already passed. Ignoring the voice of guidance does not harden the heart all at once. It happens gradually. At first, discernment still works, but it feels weaker. Conviction still appears, but it is easier to dismiss. Over time, the internal signal that once felt clear becomes faint. People begin to rely more on logic than leading, more on comfort than correction. This is not rebellion in most cases, it is slow desensitization. And desensitization is one of the most effective ways protection erodes. Jesus never stops loving those who ignore him, but love does not override spiritual law. When instruction is given and repeatedly set aside, the soul begins to adapt to operating without guidance. This adaptation feels like independence, but it is actually exposure. And exposure does not announce itself until something goes wrong. One of the most subtle consequences of ignoring guidance is confusion. Not dramatic confusion, but small uncertainty that grows. Decisions that once felt easy begin to feel heavy. Peace becomes inconsistent. You may still pray, still believe, still hope, but something feels off. This is not abandonment. It is misalignment. And misalignment always costs more the longer it remains uncorrected. Another silent consequence is misplaced confidence. When warnings are ignored and nothing immediately collapses, people assume they were strong enough on their own. This false confidence leads them to take steps they were never meant to take. By the time the weight of those decisions shows up, they are already deeply invested. Jesus warns early to prevent the depth of loss. Waiting for one more sign is especially dangerous. Wanting confirmation is not wrong, but delaying obedience while demanding certainty places you in a vulnerable position. Signs are given to guide, not to negotiate timing. When you ask for another sign after clarity has already been provided, you are not seeking wisdom, you are avoiding discomfort. And discomfort avoided now often becomes pain later. The consequences of ignoring divine instruction are also relational. Relationships that were once supportive may begin to strain. Not because people change, but because alignment did. When you step out of sync with guidance, you often drift out of sync with those who were meant to walk alongside you in this season. This drift feels confusing because it is subtle, but it is real. Jesus warns because he sees further than you can. He sees not only where a path leads, but what it will cost you to stay on it. Ignoring that foresight does not cancel the destination. It only removes the protection along the way. And unprotected journeys are exhausting. There is also a spiritual numbness that follows repeated ignoring. The voice does not disappear, but it becomes easier to talk over. This numbness is dangerous because it feels like peace. But peace without alignment is not peace, it is suppression. True peace aligns you. False peace anesthetizes you. Many people who later say, "I don't know how I got here," were warned early. Not loudly, not grammatically, but clearly. This message exists to prevent that sentence from becoming yours. February 7 is not about predicting disaster. It is about preventing regret. Jesus does not want you to learn through loss what you could have learned through listening. Loss is a teacher, but it is a harsh one. Guidance is gentler. That is why this message is so firm. Firmness now is kindness later. If you have ever looked back and realized a moment where you should have acted sooner, you understand this truth. The pain was not just what happened, it was knowing you were warned. This message is removing that future pain by placing the responsibility clearly in your hands now. Ignoring this does not mean everything falls apart immediately. That is not how it works. Life continues. Routines remain. But direction slowly weakens. And when direction weakens, people walk into things they never planned to face. This is why Jesus speaks before doors close. He wants you positioned on the right side of the shift. He wants you covered, not scrambling. A warning ignored becomes a lesson later. A warning received becomes protection. The next part will move away from consequences and toward guidance. It will reveal how this message is not only a warning, but a map, one that shows you how to realign before confusion takes root. Understanding this will help you respond with clarity rather than fear. This message was never meant to leave you in fear or uncertainty. It was meant to guide you. After every warning Jesus gives, there is always direction. And that direction is not complicated, but it is precise. Guidance does not always come as a list of steps. Often, it comes as an inner realignment, a recalibration of focus, desire, and obedience. What Jesus is offering you now is not just avoidance of harm, but clarity of path. Guidance begins where honesty begins. Before any outward change can happen, there must be an inward acknowledgement. Not shame, not self-accusation. Yes, truth. Truth about what you already know needs to shift. Many people delay because they are waiting for something external to change first. But guidance flows when you decide internally to respond. The moment you say, even quietly, "I will listen," direction becomes clearer. For some, guidance right now looks like stopping. Stopping a pattern, a habit, a relationship dynamic, or a line of thinking that has been draining rather than building. Stopping is not failure, it is obedience. For others, guidance looks like starting, moving into something that has been delayed out of fear, insecurity, or overthinking. Both stopping and starting require courage, and both activate protection when done in obedience. Jesus often guides by narrowing options. What once felt like many choices may suddenly feel reduced to one clear direction. This narrowing is not restriction, it is focus. Focus protects you from distraction and from paths that look appealing but are not assigned to you. When guidance feels narrow, it is because accuracy matters. Another form of guidance is correction of timing. You may be doing the right thing, but at the wrong pace, or the wrong time. Rushing ahead can be just as dangerous as lagging behind. Jesus adjusts timing to keep you aligned with protection. This is why some plans stall and others accelerate unexpectedly. Guidance is not static. It moves with seasons. This message is also guiding you to pay attention to inner resistance. Resistance often points to the very area where obedience is required. Not all resistance is spiritual attack. Sometimes it is the flesh resisting change. Guidance invites you to examine resistance rather than run from it. When you do, clarity follows. Jesus is also guiding you to simplify. Complexity often hides avoidance. When things feel overly complicated, it is often because the simple truth is being avoided. Guidance cuts through noise. It asks direct questions. It calls for direct responses. You do not need to solve everything at once. You only need to respond to what has already been revealed. One of the clearest signs of guidance is peace that follows decision. Not the peace of staying comfortable, but the peace that comes after choosing alignment, even if the choice is difficult. That peace is confirmation. It does not mean everything becomes easy, but it means you are covered while moving forward. Guidance also comes through separation. Not isolation, but discernment about who and what no longer fits the season you are entering. This can be painful, especially when attachments are emotional. But separation guided by Jesus always leads to preservation. What is removed makes room for what is assigned. You are not being guided blindly. Even if you cannot see the full picture, you are being led step by step. Jesus does not demand leaps without light. He provides just enough illumination for the next obedient move. Trust grows in motion, not in waiting. This part of the message is important because it shifts your role from passive listener to active participant. You are not meant to admire the warning. You are meant to walk out the guidance. That walk does not require perfection, only responsiveness. February 7 is a marker, but it is not the end of guidance. It is the beginning of alignment for those who respond. What follows is not chaos but clarity, not loss but direction, not fear but focus. The next part will explain why this season brings separation, and how that separation is not meant to harm you, but to protect you with precision. Understanding this will help you release what must go without regret. Every season of warning is followed by a season of separation. This is not something to fear, but it is something to understand. Separation is one of the most misunderstood movements of God because people often associate it with loss. In truth, separation is about precision. It is how God protects what must be preserved and removes what no longer belongs in the next phase. February marks such a season, a dividing line where alignment becomes visible through what remains and what quietly falls away. Separation does not always look dramatic. There are no loud announcements, no sudden collapses, no obvious confrontations. Often, it feels like a gradual shift in tolerance. What you once endured begins to feel heavy. What you once refused starts to disturb your peace. Conversations feel empty. Environments feel draining. This is not dissatisfaction. It is discernment awakening. Jesus uses separation to refine focus, not to punish attachment. Many people struggle in seasons like this because they confuse familiarity with calling. Just because something hath been part of your life for a long time does not mean it is meant to continue with you. Familiarity can become a substitute for obedience if left unchecked. Separation exposes this gently at first, then more firmly if ignored. This is why February feels like a dividing line for many. It is not that God suddenly changes his mind about people or paths. It is that seasons change, and not everything is permitted to cross over. What was allowed before may no longer be safe now. What was useful before may now be a distraction. Separation ensures that what enters the next phase does not contaminate. Jesus separates without cruelty. He does not rip things away without warning. He loosens attachments slowly, giving time to adjust, to understand, to respond. But when separation is resisted too long, it begins to feel painful, not because God is harsh, but because resistance always hurts more than release. There are listeners who are already experiencing this. Relationships that feel distant, desires that no longer satisfy, plans that no longer excite. This does not mean you are failing. It means you are transitioning. And transitions require discernment more than emotion. Emotion wants to hold on. Discernment knows when to let go. Separation also reveals obedience. Those who respond to guidance experience separation as clarity. Those who resist experience it as loss. The difference is not in the separation itself, but in the posture of the heart. When you release what is being removed, peace follows. When you cling, anxiety increases. This is how you can tell whether separation is being resisted or received. Jesus is separating to protect. Protection sometimes means distance. Distance from patterns that weakened you. Distance from influences that dulled your discernment. Distance from environments that encouraged compromise. Separation creates space for strength to return. Another important truth is this: separation is not rejection. Being separated from something does not mean you are unloved or unworthy. Often, it means you are being repositioned. God separates what He intends to use with clarity. Confusion thrives in crowded spaces. Purpose requires room. February's role in this message is not mystical. It is practical. It represents a moment where indecision becomes dangerous. You cannot remain half-aligned and expect full protection. Separation forces choice. It clarifies identity. It answers the question of who is willing to move forward and who prefers comfort. Some will try to negotiate separation. They will attempt to bring old attachments into new seasons, old habits into new callings, old mindsets into new responsibilities. This never works. New seasons require new alignment. Jesus is firm here because compromise and transition leads to collapse later. Separation also reveals covering. Those who remain aligned will notice a strange peace even as things fall away. That peace is not denial, it is assurance. It is the sign that what is leaving is not meant to harm you by its absence. What remains is what you are meant to carry forward. Do not rush to fill the gaps separation creates. Emptiness is not always a problem. Sometimes it is preparation. Filling space too quickly often invites replacements that are just as misaligned as what was removed. Trust the process. Let clarity settle. The season is not about isolation. It is about refinement. You are not being left alone. You are being led forward with precision. Separation sharpens your path so that confusion does not follow you into what comes next. The next part will bring this to a point of decision. It will address the moment where neutrality is no longer possible and why choosing alignment now carries lasting impact. That moment is closer than it appears. There comes a moment in every spiritual journey when neutrality is no longer an option. That moment is not loud. It does not arrive with force or spectacle. It comes quietly, firmly, and unmistakably. This is that moment. After warning, after guidance, after separation, there is always a point of decision. And that decision determines not only what you walk into, but what walks with you. Up until now, delay may have felt harmless. Indecision may have felt safe. Waiting may have felt wise. But there are seasons when waiting becomes disobedience and hesitation becomes risk. This is one of those seasons. Jesus is not asking you to have everything figured out. He is asking you to choose alignment over avoidance. Heaven records moments like this. Not to accuse, but to mark. Moments when truth was clear. Moments when instruction was given. Moments when the heart knew what needed to be done. Decisions made in these moments carry unusual weight because they set direction. They determine which doors you are standing behind when they finally close. Choosing alignment does not mean everything becomes easy. It means everything becomes ordered. Order brings peace, even when the path is challenging. Disorder brings anxiety, even when circumstances look calm. This is why Jesus presses for decision now. Disorder is dangerous in seasons of transition. Some people confuse decision with perfection. They believe they must feel completely ready before responding. But readiness often comes after obedience and not before. Decision is not about feeling strong. It is about being willing. Willingness invites strength. Willingness invites clarity. Willingness invites covering. This is also the moment where comfort is tested. Comfort often disguises itself as wisdom. It says, "Stay where you are. Nothing is wrong enough to change." But comfort can become a trap when it keeps you from moving where protection is leading. Jesus does not call you to comfort. He calls you to life. And life sometimes requires movement. Choosing alignment may mean letting go of an identity you have outgrown. It may mean admitting that something you defended no longer serves you. It may mean stepping forward without applause. These choices are rarely celebrated immediately, but they are always rewarded in time. There is also a sobering truth here. Refusing to choose is still a choice. Neutrality does not freeze outcomes. It decides them by default. When doors close, they do not wait for those who hesitated. They close according to timing, not intention. That is why this decision matters now. Jesus is not pressuring you. Pressure produces fear. He is calling you. Calling produces purpose. This call is not to panic, but to position yourself correctly. Position determines experience. Where you stand matters. Some listening may feel a quiet urgency rising, not panic but seriousness. That is discernment. Discernment recognizes when moments are weighty. You not ignore that signal. It is guiding you toward safety. This decision also affects your ability to hear going forward. Those who respond experience sharper clarity. Those who delay experience dullness. Not as punishment but as consequence. Response keeps the channel open. You are not being asked to leap blindly. You are being asked to step deliberately. One step. One response. One act of obedience. That is enough to signal alignment. God does not require dramatic gestures. He responds to sincere movement. What you choose now echoes. It sets tone. It establishes posture. It decides whether the next season feels guided or confusing. This is why the moment feels heavy. Weighty moments always do. You will be glad you stayed for what's about to be revealed. Type "I choose alignment" in the comments if you are responding to this call. Lesson code 842 is now activated. As this moment of decision settles in your spirit, I want to speak plainly. This word is not just for you. It is meant to reach many who are standing at the same crossroads but cannot yet hear clearly. When you give through Super Thanks, membership, or PayPal, you are placing oil in the lamp so this light does not go out before it reaches them. I hear the Lord saying, "Those who sow into my warning will not be caught unprepared." This is not about money. It is about obedience meeting impact. The PayPal link is in the description, and the QR code is flashing for those called to act now. I speak blessing over every giver. May your obedience open doors no one can shut. Do not delay what God has placed in your heart to release now. Responding before the door shifts is not about reacting emotionally. It is about moving spiritually. Emotion reacts to pressure, fear, or excitement. Spiritual response is calmer, clearer, and more deliberate. Jesus is not asking you to panic. He is asking you to position yourself correctly while there is still light to see by. Response is not measured by how intense you feel, but by how willing you are to act on what you already know. Many people misunderstand response because they think it must be dramatic. They assume obedience requires a visible, life-altering move all at once. But most spiritual shifts begin with small, decisive acts. A conversation you stop avoiding. A boundary you finally set. A habit you release. A commitment you stop postponing. These actions may seem small, but in moments like this they carry enormous weight. Responding spiritually also means refusing to negotiate with delay. Delay sounds reasonable. It says, "I'll do it soon," or "I just need more time." But time-sensitive instruction loses power when delayed. Jesus does not warn early so you can respond late. He warns early so you can respond while protection is still active in that form. One of the clearest ways to respond is through agreement followed by movement. Agreement alone is not response. Movement confirms agreement. Even if you do not know every step ahead, taking the next right step signals alignment. That signal matters more than you realize. Heaven responds to motion. Another aspect of response is humility. Humility says, "I don't need to fully understand to obey." Pride waits for certainty. Humility trusts guidance. Many miss critical moments not because they are rebellious, but because they are overly analytical. Analysis has its place, but obedience often precedes explanation. Responding also means adjusting expectations. Some expect immediate visible reward after obedience. When that does not happen, they question whether their response mattered. But response is not about instant results. It is about correct positioning. Results unfold over time, often quietly. Protection is most effective when it goes unnoticed. This is also where many people hesitate because they fear making the wrong move. But responding to clear instruction is never wrong, even if the outcome looks different than expected. Jesus corrects direction mid-journey, but he does not guide those who refuse to move at all. Motion keeps you within guidance. If you are unsure what response looks like for you, pay attention to what has been repeatedly highlighted in your spirit. Not new ideas, but recurring ones. Not sudden impulses, but persistent nudges. That is where your response is needed. Obedience is rarely confusing. Avoidance makes it seem that way. Responding before the door shifts also requires courage to be misunderstood. Others may not see the urgency you feel. They may question your timing or your decision. But alignment is not a group vote. It is a personal responsibility. Jesus calls individuals, not crowds, to obedience. This is also a moment to recognize that response strengthens faith. Faith grows when you see God meet you in obedience. Each response builds confidence for the next. Ignoring instruction weakens faith because it trains the heart to doubt guidance. Response restores trust. If this message hath been speaking to you clearly, do not let this moment pass without marking it. Engage with it intentionally. Like this message as an act of acknowledgement that you heard and received it. Share it with someone who may be standing at the same edge but has not yet recognized the urgency. Leave a comment, not casually, but deliberately, as a record of your response. And if you are not subscribed, subscribe now, as a way of staying connected to guidance meant for moments like this. These actions are not about platforms, they are about participation. When you respond, you move out of passivity and into alignment. You stop being a bystander and become a participant in what God is doing in this season. That shift matters more than you know. Do not underestimate the power of responding while the door is still open. Once it shifts, response looks very different. And now, response brings protection. Later, response brings recovery. Both matter, but only one preserves ease and clarity. This moment is not meant to overwhelm you. It is meant to empower you. You are being given a chance to move with foresight rather than hindsight. Few people are offered that. Many only understand after the fact. Something critical is about to be revealed next. Something that explains what happens after the deadline passes and why some feel peace while others feel resistance. That understanding will help you recognize the fruit of your response. Hold on, what comes next brings everything into focus. After February 7, something subtle but unmistakable begins to unfold. It is not announced publicly. It does not arrive with noise or spectacle. Life continues on the surface much as it did before. People go to work, routines remain, conversations continue. Yet beneath that normalcy, a spiritual shift settles in. And this shift reveals itself not through events alone, but through internal experience. For those who responded, there is an unexpected sense of steadiness. Even if circumstances remain uncertain, peace becomes more consistent. Decisions feel clearer. Resistance lessened. It is not that challenges disappear, but they no longer dominate the inner world. This is one of the quiet signs of alignment. When you move in time with guidance, you may not avoid difficulty, but you avoid confusion. And confusion is far heavier than difficulty. For those who delayed or ignored the warning, the shift feels different. Not immediately painful, but noticeably off. Direction feels harder to grasp. Small decisions feel draining. Peace becomes conditional. This is not punishment, it is consequence. When a season ends, the grace assigned to that season ends with it. Grace continues, but in a different form, often more corrective than protective. This is why some people feel resistance after deadlines pass. Resistance is the friction of moving against timing. It is the soul sensing that it is no longer supported in the same way. Many mistake this resistance for external opposition, when in truth it is internal misalignment. The environment did not change suddenly. Access did. After February 7, doors do not slam shut loudly. They simply stop responding. Opportunities that once felt reachable feel distant. Answers that once came quickly feel delayed. This is not silence meant to torment. It is silence meant to signal that a window has closed. The tragedy is not the silence. It is realizing too late that the warning was real. Those who responded early experienced something else. Preservation. Preservation is different from promotion. It is being kept steady while others scramble. It is clarity while others second-guess. It is peace while others strive. Preservation often looks unremarkable, but it is priceless. There is also a dividing effect that becomes visible over time. People who were once walking similar paths begin to diverge. Not dramatically, but decisively. One moves with increasing clarity. The other moves with increasing effort. One feels supported. The other feels strained. This is not favoritism. It is alignment showing fruit. After February 7, regret often begins quietly. Not as panic, but as small realizations. I should have acted sooner. I knew this was coming. These thoughts surface not to condemn, but to awaken. Unfortunately, awakening after a door has closed requires a different kind of work. Recovery instead of preservation. Healing instead of shielding. God is still faithful, but the process is heavier. This is why Jesus warns beforehand. He prefers to protect rather than repair. Repair is possible, but protection is easier. Those who responded spared themselves unnecessary strain. Those who did not still have hope, but the terrain is rougher. Another thing that happens after February 7 is that distractions lose their comfort. What once numbed discomfort stops working. People may try to drown unease in activity, noise, or explanation, but the underlying restlessness remains. This is not cruelty. It is exposure. Exposure invites repentance. Repentance invites realignment. But the path back is longer than the path forward would have been. For those aligned, there is also an increase in discernment. Not arrogance, not superiority, just clarity. You begin to recognize what belongs and what does not. You sense when to move and when to wait. This discernment is not loud. It is calm. It is the fruit of timely obedience. After February 7, God does not stop working. He simply works differently with different people based on response. Some experience advancement, others experience correction. Both are expressions of love, but they feel very different. This part of the message is meant to remove confusion about outcomes. If you feel peace, clarity, and steadiness after responding, that is confirmation. If you feel increasing resistance, heaviness, or fog after delaying, that is also information. Not to shame you, but to call you back while humility is still accessible. Jesus never abandons, but he does honor timing. And timing honored brings ease. Timing ignored brings friction. The next part will speak directly to those who responded with fear, wondering if obedience will cost them something precious. It will bring assurance and remind you why obedience never leads to loss, even when it feels like it might. For many who have responded to this message, a quiet fear may still linger beneath the surface. Not fear of judgment, but fear of loss. The question that whispers is subtle but persistent. What if obedience costs me something I care about? This question has followed people of faith for generations, and it is one Jesus understands deeply. That is why assurance always follows obedience when the heart is sincere. Obedience never leads to loss. It only exposes what was never meant to be carried forward. What feels like loss at first is often release, and release creates space for preservation. Jesus does not ask you to obey blindly so that he can take from you. He asks you to obey so he can keep you from losing what truly matters. Fear often comes from imagining outcomes without understanding purpose. When you cannot yet see what is ahead, the mind fills the gap with worst-case scenarios. But faith is not built on imagination. It is built on trust. Trust that Jesus sees beyond the immediate moment. Trust that he would never guide you into harm while offering protection in the same breath. There are people listening who obeyed even while trembling. But trembling does not disqualify you. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is movement despite it. Jesus honors that kind of obedience deeply. He meets it with reassurance, not rebuke. One of the greatest assurances Jesus gives is peace that does not depend on circumstances. If you have responded and noticed a steadier inner calm, even without visible change yet, that is not coincidence. That is confirmation. Peace is the language of alignment. It is the soul recognizing it is where it belongs. Obedience may feel costly in the short term because it often requires surrendering control. Control feels safe because it is familiar. Trust feels risky because it is relational. But control is an illusion. Trust is a covering. When you release control in obedience, you step under a protection that no amount of planning can replicate. Some worry that obedience will make life smaller, more restricted, less fulfilling. In reality, obedience removes what limits you internally. It frees mental space. It restores focus. It simplifies decisions. Life becomes clearer, not narrower. What falls away were burdens disguised as benefits. Jesus does not remove joy to teach discipline. He removes distractions to protect joy. Many of the things people fear losing are the very things draining their peace quietly. Obedience exposes this gently, over time. Another assurance is this: God does not measure obedience by outcome, but by posture. You are not responsible for results beyond your control. You are responsible for response. When you respond rightly, the outcome is God's responsibility. That truth alone should lift weight from your shoulders. If you are wondering whether you responded correctly, look at your posture. Are you more open, more honest, more willing to adjust? That is obedience. Perfection is not required. Responsiveness is. There is also assurance in knowing that God redeems what obedience touches. Even if the step you took felt small, it matters. Small acts of obedience compound over time. They build spiritual momentum. Momentum makes future obedience easier, not harder. Some who responded may still be facing resistance externally. That does not negate alignment. External resistance often appears when internal alignment strengthens. It is not a sign you chose wrong. It is a sign you are no longer drifting. Jesus assures those who obey that they are not forgotten. He does not lead you into obscurity. He leads you into preparation. What feels quiet now is often incubation. Growth that lasts happens underground first. This part of the message is meant to steady you, to remind you that you are not behind, not exposed, not foolish for responding. You are positioned. You are covered. You are guided. What you obeyed today will protect you tomorrow. What you release now will not haunt you later. What you trusted with God will not be wasted. Obedience always pays in peace, even when it costs comfort. The final part of this message will bring everything together. It will close with confirmation, blessing, and a reminder that this warning was not meant to frighten you, but to preserve you. What you have heard, received, and responded to matters deeply. This message now comes to its close, but what it has set in motion does not end here. What began as a warning has unfolded as guidance, separation, decision, and assurance. And now it settles into confirmation. February 7 was never meant to frighten you. It was meant to preserve you. It was a moment where heaven leaned close enough for you to hear clearly before the noise returned. A moment where Jesus spoke not in anger, but in care. You were not singled out to be threatened. You were chosen to be warned because you are valuable. Final notices are not sent to those who do not matter. They are sent to those whose future is worth protecting. If you are here at the end of this message, it is because something in you recognized its importance and stayed. That alone speaks volumes. Everything you have heard points to one truth: God prefers prevention over repair. He would rather guide you around harm than heal you after it. He would rather reposition you quietly than pull you out painfully. This message was that rerouting, that gentle but firm redirection that spares you consequences you may never fully see and never need to. Some of you will look back weeks or months from now and realize just how much was avoided. You may never know all the details, and that is part of the gift. Protection is most effective when it does not need to announce itself. You will simply notice that certain struggles never materialize, certain losses never came, certain confusion never took hold. That is the fruit of timely obedience. Others may realize that this message marked a turning point, not because everything changed overnight, but because you did. Your posture shifted, your discernment sharpened, your willingness deepened, and those internal changes set external outcomes in motion. This is how real transformation happens, quietly, consistently, and with divine covering. If you are feeling relief rather than fear now, that is intentional. Warnings from Jesus always lead to peace when they are received. Fear belongs to uncertainty. Peace belongs to alignment. The peace you feel is not emotional, it is positional. You are where you are meant to be. Remember this. Obedience did not remove you from God's love. It placed you deeper into it. You did not lose anything of value by responding. What left was not meant to go forward with you. What remains is what you are called to steward next. As this message closes, take a moment to breathe. You are not late. You are not behind. You are not exposed. You are covered. You are guided. You are seen. Jesus does not abandon those he warns, he walks with those who listen. Carry this awareness with you, not as pressure but as clarity. Let it inform your choices gently. Let it strengthen your discernment. Let it remind you that timing matters, and that listening early is a gift many never receive. Type "I receive" his covering in the comments if you feel peace after this message. Blessing code 915 is now activated. As this message comes to rest in your spirit, I want to speak with clarity and authority. What you just received is not meant to stop with you. It is meant to flow through you to others who are still waiting for a warning like this. When you give through Super Thanks, membership, or PayPal, you are sowing into living water that reaches souls before their doors close. I hear the Lord saying, "Those who fund my voice will never lack direction." This is not generosity. It is obedience with impact. The PayPal link is in the description, and the QR code is visible now for those called to act. I release blessing over every giver. May your homes be covered, your decisions be clear, and your steps be ordered. You it now, because obedience responded to in the moment releases favor that delay cannot.